Good evening. Evening. All right, great. Listen, I know it's kind of dwindled over the weeks, but that's okay because it's just as good tonight as it was the last 2 weeks. Last week, this is week 3 for practical parenting. Thank you all for being here. And one of the things I mentioned last week was this Genesis 2 before Acts 2. God wants a healthy family. And that's what makes a healthy church. And so, not only that, but that's where all the rest of the relationships come from. So, as you guys are sitting and writing and thinking, all that stuff, I know there's going to be some great things tonight. So, we appreciate Abby and Ashley being here from Summit Wellness. And this is the last week. So, next week, we will start men's and women's groups back up at 5:30. So, we'd love to have you for that as well. Without further ado, ladies.
Hey guys, has everyone been here for the other 2 sessions, or do we have anyone new today? Okay, yay!
Glad you're here.
Well, yes, I think we just introduced ourselves, but I'm Abby.
Yeah, I'm Ashley.
I'm gonna miss you guys next Thursday. We've spent so much good time together, and I'm sad that it's ending. But I think we have a lot of good stuff for you guys today to kind of close us out. I wanted to first kind of lead us in prayer, and then we'll kind of talk about last week a little bit. Dear Lord, I thank you so much for today. I thank you for this group who has stuck it out for 3 weeks with us and just wants to learn more and more about how they can be better parents. I pray over them tonight. I pray over their minds and their hearts that you will just allow them to hear what you want them to hear. Guide Ashley and I's words in what we say, and just help us to do our best to help these families be the best parents that they can be. We thank you again so much for them, and I just pray your blessing on these families just as they're raising their kids, that you would be the center of that and that you would be in their homes every day, guiding them, guiding their kids, and just bringing them together as a family. We love you so much, Lord. In your name, amen. All right. So I wanted to check in first for those who have been here. Actually, I want everyone to move up. So you can kind of ignore the grouping signs on the back since we have a smaller group. If everyone could move forward just so we can see your faces. It's a little harder to see in the back. So can I take a minute for people to scooch up here? Okay. Whatever you guys want. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. The brave ones.
Yes.
That's okay. Thank you guys for moving for us. Okay, so we wanted to check in on how homework went last week. How have things been? Were you able to implement anything that we talked about last time? Homework. Well, that's okay.
Yeah, we heard some people earlier talking about flipping their lid, using that language at home. So that I know that was helpful. Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, just practice makes not perfect, but it makes things better. So it just takes weeks and weeks of doing this stuff to kind of see a change in it.
Yeah, so last week we talked about, or I guess it was 2 weeks ago, we talked about the left and the right brain. The right brain is more the emotional brain, the left brain is the logical brain. We talked about connecting with our right brain, so connecting with our kids with our tone, getting down at their level, and then redirecting and problem solving with them with their left brain. We talked about naming their emotions in order to tame them, helping them do that. Last week, we talked about the upstairs and the downstairs brain. So if you guys remember the hand model, so this is the brain. The top part of my hand is the prefrontal cortex. That's the part of the brain that is the thinking brain, the planning brain, all the things that we would like for our kids to be able to embody. And then when our lid flips, when the upstairs brain goes offline, we talked about how the downstairs brain holds the flight, fight, or freeze, and also holds the big emotions where we act before we think. So we talked about the strategy, use it or lose it. So teaching them how to stay in that upstairs brain by co-regulation, so helping our kids regulate their emotions. We talked about move it or lose it. So if our child is in the downstairs brain, just having them move their body in order to get their upstairs brain back online. So now that we've taught you how to help your kids stay in the upstairs brain, the thinking brain, we're going to talk about integrating that whole brain and how to change the way our brains think. We're going to do this by talking about neuroplasticity. We're going to talk more about what that big word is. We're going to talk about the connection between our thoughts and our emotions and our actions. We're going to talk about how to get unstuck, ourselves and our kids. We're going to talk about relationships and how that affects our children's brain. And we're going to talk about understanding our own story and how that impacts the way we parent as well. So, this week we're talking about integrating the whole brain. So, how to change the way our brains think and how to change the way our children's brains think. So, this is called neuroplasticity. It means that we can adapt and change our brain. The bad news is it can be harmed and impacted by our toxic, negative, and unhelpful thoughts, especially those thoughts that are repetitive. Neurons that fire together wire together, meaning that when neurons or brain cells in your brain is activated in a particular pattern, it is faster and easier for our brain to go that direction, that same pattern in the future. This explains why we can get stuck dealing with certain emotions or preoccupations or thoughts. For example, I want you guys to think back to the time that you first learned how to drive. You first got in your car for the first time ever, 15, 16, something like that, maybe younger, I don't know. But I want you to think about all the things you had to think about. You had to think about having your hand on 10 and 2, all the traffic laws, all the traffic going around you, the windows in both the front and the back and the sides. It's a lot to think about. You could have said, driving is not for me. This is too much. I just don't have it in me. But instead, you practice, 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 and now it's second nature. So that's neuroplasticity at work. The more anxiety and stress you feel when focusing on problems, the more your brain builds those neural pathways that link the negative thoughts with those problems, and the more stress and anxiety become a natural reaction. The good news is your brain can heal as a result of consistent, healthy, helpful, truthful thinking, which means we can change our brain. So at first, changing our brain to more healthy thoughts is going to take time. But the more you do it, the easier it gets. So for instance, if you guys have ever been on a sled before, the first time, if there's no pathways on that the snow, at first it's really hard. You have to like scoot your way to go down the hill. But the more you do it, the easier and faster you get to go down the hill. So it's kind of like a sled. That's kind of the way our brain works. So this next slide is a brain scan of the same brain. The red part of that brain scan represents overactivity in the brain due to negative and unhealthy thinking. And the other brain scan, if you look at that one right there, it shows our brain after it's been trained to think healthy and truthful thoughts. So this shows the importance of retraining our brain. We can't allow toxic thoughts to run amok in our brain. So as followers of Christ, we must submit not only our own lives to Jesus, but also our thoughts about ourselves and about our kids. And this results in a rewiring of our brain and a renewal of our minds. So Romans 12:2 talks about how we shouldn't be conformed by this world, but instead be transformed by the renewal of our minds. So let's allow Christ to do a full reconstruction on our minds.
I was actually just talking to someone about this today, and they have a pretty significant past history of trauma. And so they have some of this, like, really wired pathways that lead them to think a certain way. And we talked about the concept of neuroplasticity, and they were like, wait, you mean that I'm not always going to automatically think about this thing for my whole life? Like, I can fix this and I can retrain it. So it takes work, but I think this concept and really understanding your brain and the way that it works can bring you so much hope of the ability to change. Sometimes we get in that rut and we're not able to to think this will always be the same way. This can never be different. But I think the beauty of this concept and how God created our minds is that we can change and we can grow, and He can almost relieve us from some of that pain that we feel associated with our thoughts as well.
Yeah. And this is a video about more neuroplasticity.
Not so long ago, many scientists believed that the brain did not change after childhood, that it was hardwired and fixed by the time we became adults. But recent advances in only the last decade now tell us that this is simply not true. The brain can and does change throughout our lives. It is adaptable, like plastic. Hence, neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. How does neuroplasticity work? If you think of your brain as a dynamic, connected power grid, there are billions of pathways or roads lighting up every time you think, feel, or do something. Some of these roads are well travelled. These are our habits, our established ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. Every time we think in a certain way, practice a particular task, or feel a specific emotion, we strengthen this road. It becomes easier for our brains to travel this pathway. Say we think about something differently, learn a new task, or choose a different emotion. We start carving out a new road. If we keep travelling that road, our brains begin to use this pathway more, and this new way of thinking, feeling, or doing becomes second nature. The old pathway gets used less and weakens. This process of rewiring your brain by forming new connections and weakening old ones is neuroplasticity in action. The good news is that we all have the ability to learn and change by rewiring our brains. If you have ever changed a bad habit or thought about something differently, you have carved a new pathway in your brain and experienced neuroplasticity firsthand. With repeated and directed attention towards your desired change, you can rewire your brain.
Okay. So we're going to talk about a strategy of how we do this. Like, how do we use our brains to rewire themselves? Does it just mean ignoring something that we're thinking? Does it just mean distracting us? It doesn't. There's some actual tools based on the way that our brains go from thought to feeling to behavior that we can use to actually restructure our brains in these moments. So we're going to talk about the cognitive triangle. This is a strategy based in a therapy called cognitive behavioral therapy, and it helps us to better understand the relation between our thoughts, feelings, and our behaviors. We're going to learn how to use this tool kind of for yourselves, but then also be able to use it for your kids. So once you learn how to restructure your thoughts, it's actually a pretty simple diagram that you can teach to your kids. I've taught it to a lot of kids that I've had in therapy. So it's kind of based on the concept of taking our thoughts captive. So acknowledging our thoughts, taking them captive, and then using what we know to be able to shift them. And it is such a cool concept, kind of like Ashley said, like God gives us the ability to do these things. To focus on things that are pleasing, purpose-filled to Him, to refocus our thoughts even on Him. If there's something of this world that is distracting us or consuming us, our brains actually have the power scientifically to focus back on Him and the Holy Spirit so that we can be the best version of ourselves. So I'm going to show you this diagram. So for some people, this feels kind of like revolutionary. Like maybe you don't know that your thoughts and your feelings are different yet. One time, my husband and I were arguing, and we were having an argument kind of about family stuff. And I was like, your feelings are guiding what you're thinking right now. This is not how it works in your brain. And so we paused our argument for a second, and I taught him about the cognitive triangle, and he was like, I've been married to you for 3 years, and you didn't tell me that thoughts and feelings are different. And I was like, you didn't know that thoughts and feelings are different? So that was revolutionary for him. He's used this in a sermon since then. So I don't know, just kind of understanding the way that connects, I think, can be really revolutionary for us. I just thought that was funny. But we kind of have the power in our thoughts to tell us what is true, untrue, helpful, or unhelpful in the way that our brains are working. And we have control of our thoughts. So our thoughts are something that we tell ourselves about people or about the world, and they kind of inform us. Sometimes our thoughts blip so quickly in our mind that they go straight to our emotion, and we don't even realize what we're thinking underneath that. So that's what we're going to learn kind of how to do today, is recognize those. I think that's what was happening to my husband in that story. It was just going so quickly from thought that he just felt the feeling so strongly. And then feelings are our emotions. So what we kind of talked about last week with the emotions chart, and being able to feel sad, mad, happy, all those things are our feelings. And it's hard to change our feelings. I don't know if you've noticed, if you tell your kids, or if you're mad and someone tries to tell you, well, just stop being mad, and it makes you more mad. It's because it's hard. That's not the root of it. And so to try to change it at that point, we're already to the middle. We need to trace back to the thought. And behaviors are our internal or external responses to our feelings. So behaviors can look external. They can look like my 2-year-old's going to hit his friend, or it can look like internal, like I'm shutting down right now. That's my behavior in response to maybe a feeling of sad or something like that. Okay, so an example. Maybe someone tells us we did really poorly on a project. We had a group project, and they were like, you were the weak link. We might think, I'm not good at group projects. We might put a blanket statement over ourselves. We might feel stupid, sad, overwhelmed. And then we might behave by pulling ourselves away or secluding ourselves, or maybe even overthinking the next group project. Like, I can't do this, setting yourself up for that. We might not be as confident based on our feeling of I am stupid, based on feeling stupid, and based on our thought of I can't do this, I'm not enough. So some automatic reactions that might happen in the brain due to the way it's pruned. So if someone tells you something, if something's has the power to speak over you time and time again, your brain, as Ashley was saying, is using neuroplasticity to prune that into you. So maybe as an adult, you have the ability to be a great speaker, but so many times you've thought before a group project, I'm the weak link, I'm the worst, I can't do this. As an adult, you're going to think, my job can't be anything involved with speaking in front of people because I'm just not good at that. You've programmed your brain to think that way. This is the importance of taking them captive. Our thoughts can automatically program like that. And so really stopping to take a minute and think about what we're thinking. Ashley's going to talk about some of the common thoughts that we might have that are called thinking errors. And this is really helpful to acknowledge. There is a handout. The first one that you have are some common thinking errors if you want to follow along as she explains those.
Yeah, so these thinking errors, we're going to talk more about the thought piece just because the thoughts can often drive the rest of that cycle. So, the thinking errors we use in counseling a lot because a lot of our problems can come from thinking errors. Then they're just not true. So a couple of common parenting thinking errors that you see on this slide. The first one is catastrophizing. So predicting doom and gloom. And that might look like for you, I need to get him to stop acting like this because if he keeps this up, he's never going to make friends. Is this true? No. Is this helpful? No. And so we want to reframe that thought into something that's true and helpful. And that might look like I have the opportunity to be with him right now so that he can make friends in the future. Another example of this might be labeling. So assigning labels to either you or your child. And that might look like, oh, I'm a horrible mother because I yelled. Is this true? No. Is it helpful? No. So we want to reframe that thought into a thought that's true and helpful. And that might look like, I got overwhelmed for a moment. And that's okay. A lot of parents do. Another one is personalization. So making your child's behavior personal. And that might look like, doesn't he see how much I do for him? She's just trying to make me mad. Is this true? No. Is it helpful? No. So we want to reframe the thought into something that's true and helpful. And that might look like, I can't know their motivation without talking to them. So we have to notice our thoughts and label them, noticing if they're helpful and true, and then reframe those thoughts into something that is helpful and true. So if you look at that worksheet there's plenty of other thinking errors. I just picked out a few that I felt like might be more common ones with parenting. And so I just want you to take a second to look at those thinking errors, and I want you to put a bullet just pointing out ones that you see in yourself or doing with your children. So just for a moment. You can cue the music for a second if you want. Okay. So are there any thinking errors that stand out that anybody feels comfortable sharing? That maybe you wrestle with for you or your child? Yeah? Disqualifying the positives. Yes, definitely. And seeing more of the negatives. Yes. That's a good one. Okay, yes. Yes. It's a big one, absolutely. The negatives are more easy to get stuck on, which we're going to talk more about. Yes, jumping to conclusions for sure without knowing the whole story. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. All or nothing. Oh, yes, the black and white thinking. Definitely. Yes. Okay. So our brains are similar to our children's brains in the way that they have thinking errors too. So these thinking errors will often drive their big emotions. So it's very helpful to know kind of what's going on in their head as well. So here are a few thinking errors that we see mostly in counseling pertaining to children. The first one being blowing things up. So making a really big deal out of something small and making something a little bit bad seem like the worst thing ever. So for a teenager, that might look like, I'm not allowed to see my friends this Friday. My life is absolutely horrible. Is this helpful? No. Is it true? No. So we want to help them reframe that thought. And that might look like, this is hard in the moment, but it will pass. The next one is feelings as facts. So believing if you feel something, then it must be true. And that might look like, okay, yes. Yes. So for our kids, it might look like I feel stupid, so I am stupid. And so is this helpful? No. Is it true? No. And so we want to help them reframe that. And we might say, just because you feel that way doesn't mean that you are stupid. This feeling will pass. So some of the all or nothing thinking is definitely another one in kids as well as adults. So thinking in extremes. And that might look like just something as simple as, I'm having a really bad day. Is that helpful? No. Is it true? It might be a little bit true, but we want to help them reframe that thought into noticing, well, what were some good things about that day too? Noticing that it's not all bad. There are some good things that happen in that day as well. So we're going to watch a video, and it's about a 5-minute long video of a child creating a story about some thinking errors that she experienced. So I want you to, as you watch this video, notice what thinking errors she experienced, and we're going to talk about it after.
Once upon a time, there was a hedgehog named
Daisy.
And does this movie about Daisy have a title?
The title is Daisy. The title is Daisy's Party. She's turning 12, and the theme is fall. And then it kind of fades into a picture of Daisy getting on her dress for her party, and she's saying how excited she is for her 12th birthday party and that all her friends are gonna come.
And they did come. 4 of her best friends were all dressed for the party.
They have like dresses made out of leaves, and they have like little berries in their spikes.
Like berries at the tips of their spikes?
Yeah.
And what was her party like?
There's like hanging pine cones with lights, and there's little leaf piles, kind of like a ball pit, but they're leaf piles that you can jump into. And there's a big cake made out of berries. And they're dancing to the 70s party music on a dance floor.
It was autumnal bliss. Except for the fact that one person hadn't arrived.
Her best friend, her name is Lulu.
Lulu hadn't shown up at the party, even though they had been best friends since the 2nd grade and did all kinds of things together.
They like to see plays, and they like to go berry picking, and they also like helping other people, and so they craft things for them to make them feel better, like they draw things.
They had a lot of history together. So Daisy was at her 12th birthday party, wondering why Lulu, her best friend, wasn't there. And that's when her thoughts started spinning, out of control.
Daisy was thinking that, like, what if she doesn't like me? What if she hates me? Did I do something wrong?
In her head, Daisy started imagining all kinds of scenarios.
Maybe when they were joking, she accidentally hurt Lulu, or she's not being fun enough with Lulu, or she's paying too much attention to Lulu, or she's wondering if maybe they're not hanging out enough.
As the party went on, her friends noticed something was up.
Her friend's seeing that she's not dancing with everyone, and she's not, like, doing anything. She's kind of just hiding away in a corner, even though it's her birthday.
So Daisy tried to get back out there on the dance floor. But her thoughts were still on Lulu.
They'll be dancing, and then Daisy is kind of like, there's kind of like a little dreamy like thing where she's imagining all the things that could be happening, and then it actually cuts to Lulu of what's actually happening.
And what happened was...
she got stuck in the mud.
Turns out, this is kind of a common occurrence in Hedgehog Nation.
It's really sticky, and she couldn't get out of it. And Lulu calls for help, but no one comes for a while.
Until, finally,
they start moving the party outside, and Daisy starts hearing her.
It was a faint cry coming from the distance. So she ran in that direction, found Lulu, went back for her rope, and after much struggle, pulled her out of the pit.
They hug, and Daisy asks if she's okay, and she's like saying, "I'm so sorry I got stuck in the mud." So she comes and, gives her like a new dress, and then they all dance.
Still to the 70s disco?
Yes. Daisy does this thing where she spins and does this really cool thing on the ground with one of her paws out, and then Lulu comes and stands on her. The music stops and confetti comes down, and all of the hedgehogs start clapping for them.
It was in that moment that Daisy realized she had been completely overthinking. So what's the point of this story? For Lulu, it's about going around the mud pit. But for Daisy, our main character, it's about stopping for a moment and thinking, are these thoughts helpful? And if they're not, remember that you can change your thoughts. In other words,
Like, don't make it a fact, just actually wait and see.
Okay, so what were some thinking errors that you noticed that Daisy wrestled with or got stuck on? Yes, disqualifying the positive. In what way? How did you see her do that? Yes, she was thinking about her friend the whole time and she couldn't enjoy, the party. Okay, any other thinking errors you noticed? Feelings as facts. How so? Yes, exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. Any others? Yes. Jumping to conclusions. Yeah, how so? Yeah. Wandering. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It had nothing to do with her. Yeah, so you can see how these were thinking errors because we have the whole story. So I want you to look at that list and I want you to star the ones that your children or child, you see the most thinking errors that they do. So we can cue the music for a moment just to think about that.
All right. What were some of the ones that you noticed that your kids do? What was that? Magnification. Yes, that's a good one. We haven't really touched on that one yet. But yeah, making something bigger than it might be.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? Emotional reasoning. Okay. That's a good one. I think that's one a lot of our kids do. Anyone else? Those are some good ones. Did you notice that your kids were different or the same as yours? Share
Okay.
some. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it necessarily means something, but just kind of paying attention, you might be able to understand your kid a little bit more if they do share some of the ones that you kind of go to. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about our common complaints about our kids. So, our brain's tendency is to dwell on the negative things more than the positive things. This means that our kids' challenging behaviors are much more likely to get our attention and impact our mood than their positive behaviors. This also means that when we react negatively to our kids, it is much more likely to impact their mood negatively. So, studies show that it typically takes about 5 positive things to counterbalance one negative thing. Um, if you speak something over your kids, which at times we do have to correct them, right? It's like we have to tell them that what you did was wrong or this wasn't okay. We have to, that's life. There's some negative parts about life. But as a parent, you can kind of help them tolerate those negative remarks or corrections by feeding them the positive things as well. You did this. This wasn't okay. But I did notice earlier today you were doing this. Or I know you've been able to do this another time, and that was really great. Just kind of thinking of ways that you can balance that out a little bit. I want you guys to kind of think about what are the common complaints that you have about your kids. So there can be layers to this, right? My child has a very different personality to his core than I do. And so sometimes I love that. I want to be more like him. And sometimes it is the most wearing thing on me. And so that might be my common complaint about him is like, okay, I have to chase him again. Like he's got so much energy and what do I do with this? Does this lead to yada, yada, yada? My thoughts go everywhere. So kind of think about your common complaints. Do they have to do with things that irk you about your personality? Are they things that match your personality or are different than your personality? Are they things that are just your pet peeve? I mean, we don't get to choose necessarily what our kids' personality comes out like, right? And so sometimes our kids just do things that for no apparent reason is our pet peeve. So kind of take a few minutes, we'll cue the music and think about what are you saying over and over again that like, oh, I wish they didn't do this. I wish they did this differently. And write that down in your journal. All right. Anybody have one that they're willing to share? Yes. Lying? Okay. What's that? Yeah. Okay. Lying. Yeah. Oh, that one's. Yeah. Yeah. That's a hard one. That's a really hard one to be able to look past. Yeah. Sometimes you're like, I don't want to know that. Anybody else a common one you notice that pops in your brain a lot? Yeah. Yeah. yeah, I wish they were this way, or I wish their personality was a little bit different. It might make things easier for me. It might even make things easier for them. Sometimes your complaints aren't always like a selfish thing, right? Like you want them to survive and thrive, but it just feels like I wish I could just change this for them. So now I want you to kind of think about what are some positive things in order to combat these negative things. Like we said, there's going to be some corrections, there's going to be some negative things in life, but you're less likely to let these negative feelings rule the way that you think about your child and almost the category that you put your child in, if you can recognize some of the positives. Those negative thoughts about your kids can be a bit more of a temporary state of mind instead of an overall feeling about your child. I think this is something that like sneaks up on us too. Like it doesn't happen like in one day. Like it's a pattern, and that really is so true about neuroplasticity is that just time and time again, thing after thing, we find ourselves being like, oh, I just want this to be different. And so I think recognizing that when that's happening is really helpful. If you look at this example, this mom's changing her thought from my child never behaves to my child is struggling right now. I am a terrible parent to sometimes parenting is hard and I'm doing the best I can. This will never end to this is a hard moment and this too shall pass. So I think even being able to look at the age and stage, like, oh, she's 5. Like, okay, well, this is an age and stage and this is going to pass. If I hang in here, if I help continue to parent this child the best that I can, then this isn't going to happen forever. So what I want you guys to do, and I think this is really a practical thing that I want you guys to use throughout the week, is pull out your smartphone. So don't even do it on your notes. I want you to be able to access this in the moment. And I want you to think about all the things that you love about your kid, all the positive things about them that make them unique, that make them special, that you enjoy about them. This could be a memory, a really fun memory you have with them, some activity that you get to do with them. This could be something you hope for them in the future or you look for in their future. You see in them like, oh gosh, they're going to be such a great includer of people as they grow. So just take a few minutes and really hone in on what you notice about your kid that you really actually like. Okay. How did that feel writing those things down? What's that?
Much longer.
Much longer list. Okay, that's good. Yeah. That's really good. Sometimes we forget that long list when we're in the moment of stress, you know? Anybody else? I saw some people laughing out there. I feel like that's good. Like sometimes you can just have a good laugh about what you love about your kid. So the next time you're in the midst of a struggle with your child, when you find your mind focusing on catastrophizing of what are they going to turn into if they keep behaving like this, I want you to pull out this list. I want you to look at this first. It doesn't mean you don't correct them. It doesn't mean you don't hold them accountable. But by looking at this list, you're seeing the full picture of who your kid is instead of allowing your mind to only focus on the behavior that they have right now and using that for their good. Okay. So we are going to walk through this cognitive triangle right here. You have a worksheet, and you can do the worksheet with me as we talk through this one. If you have a scenario that you're thinking about with your kid right now, you can also save it and take it home and kind of process it if you've come here with someone or kind of in your own quiet time and think through this. But this is a tool that I think shouldn't just go one time on this worksheet. You can use it if you're really struggling through something at home as well. So we're going to talk about how to actually do this. So our example is your child disrespects you by yelling and storming off at you. If we look at over here on the left side, we're going to think about what our initial thoughts might be. So that might be, my child does not respect me because they are selfish. We're assuming, we're jumping to conclusions, we're labeling them as selfish in this moment. So there's some roots of some irrational thinking styles, unhelpful thinking styles within that, if you notice. And then our feelings might be we feel out of control as a parent, we feel helpless, we feel frustrated at ourselves, and we feel frustrated at our child. Why can't they just listen? Sad or worried. So I think in this moment, when you're filling this out and when you're working through the triangle with your thoughts and feelings like this, it's really important to notice the layer of feelings that might be there. So maybe the initial feeling is frustration, but maybe if you go a little bit deeper as you're thinking on this, you feel really sad for your kid. You feel really sad for this interaction, and it hurts your relationship. And so acknowledging those feelings to their depth is really important when we're working through this. Then you go to your behavior. So you attempt to gain control over your child and the situation by yelling back at them. You want control, you feel out of control, and so that's how you're going to behave, because it's like, well, if they don't respect me, they're going to learn to respect me. That action is based on that thought. So what we can do is kind of looking at this from a different perspective and taking our thoughts captive. So the way we take our thoughts captive is we recognize this as something that is unhelpful and untrue. This thought is unhelpful and untrue. Our new thought is maybe something's throwing my child off today and they feel out of control. So your thought doesn't always have to find the truth right now. You don't always have to know exactly why they're doing this to you. But that's the point of this. We're not jumping to conclusions. We're just thinking based on what we know right now. Our thoughts, as well as we work through this triangle, we want to think about what's helpful most of all. So what is helpful to us? Sometimes the truth is helpful. Sometimes the truth is hard and helpful. Sometimes the truth isn't even helpful in that moment. And so we want to think on something that really helps us navigate this situation to the best of our ability. In this situation, we don't know the truth yet. So the truth may or may not be helpful. We don't know. But what we do know, we can base our thought on that. Does that make sense? Okay. So our thought, maybe something's throwing my child off today and they feel out of control. Then we're moving to a feeling of still worried because your child just acted like they did. But you feel a little bit more understanding, compassionate, maybe empathetic towards them Maybe you still feel sad. Like, why are they having such a bad day? That makes me feel sad for them. Or you still feel sad about the interaction. That's okay. And then maybe you're more motivated. Before you were out of control, now you're motivated to kind of help them through the situation. It's okay, again, going back to deepening our feelings as we work through a triangle like this. We want to think about our initial feelings, but there might be complex feelings in there. You can feel two things at once. You can feel motivated, and you can also feel sad. It's a negative and a positive, but those can exist. And then we go down to our behaviors. So in this situation, we might help our child calm down and have a conversation with them in order to understand the root of the problem. So our behavior is going to be different based on that initial thought that we had. So I want you guys to think about that again. You can do this now, or you can kind of think about this at home. And I think it's really important to start working through it yourself in order to then work through it with your kids. If you understand how to do this with your own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, then you can take the next step to guide them. I find that sometimes, not always, I have to take my thoughts captive, but when I am able to do that, I picture this triangle in my head. Like, I see it in my brain now because I've done it so many times. But you can draw it out. So for a lot of kids I work with, we'll draw it out. We'll draw that triangle. We'll talk about their thoughts, then their feelings, then their behaviors. It takes a little bit to work through it. But I think the fruits of that is so huge if you're able to really show them that visual for how their brains are working. One of the most important things for our little ones, when we talk about helpful or unhelpful thoughts, true or untrue thoughts, is to be able to put that in a term for them to understand. They don't know what helpful or unhelpful, true or untrue is. So for my littles, what I like to use is calling them warm fuzzies or cold pricklies. For some reason this works. They're able to recognize that a warm fuzzy thought makes them feel good. It helps them do the right thing. It makes them feel empowered and okay and safe and connected. A cold prickly thought makes them feel bad. It might make them feel bad about themselves. It might make them feel guilty. It might sting a little bit. So for those little ones, probably under 6, 7, that can be a tool that you can use. And they'll tell you, they'll be like, oh, I'm having a cold prickly right now. So maybe you even use this as a strategy for when you don't know what's going on in their thought life. They don't always tell you. They're just behaving and reacting. So getting to the root of it, like, oh, you just hit mommy. What kind of cold prickly were you having that made you do that? And it helps them kind of work through that.
So a part of the cognitive triangle, oftentimes we get stuck on an emotion or a thought. So have you ever not been able to go to sleep at night because something was going around and around in your head? Or maybe you couldn't enjoy something because you were worrying? You know what it's like to get stuck. So when this happens to your child, they lose all ability to see the full picture of what's going on. And instead, they see the world from the really creating a anxious and critical state of mind. So they see the world from particular points where they experience that. And they lose sight of other aspects of their life that can help them feel more balanced and happy. So for example, if a child like Jason, if he was having trouble learning how to ride his bike, and he got frustrated at himself and he felt stupid, if he gets stuck on this thought, he could then begin to believe the lie, I am stupid. And so that leads us down kind of the spiral of self-doubt. So when our kids become fixated on something they're struggling with, we can teach them how to shift their focus, helping them tell the whole story so they can become more integrated. So this really depicts Jason getting stuck on this thought, I'm stupid for not knowing how to ride a bike. We want to be able to help him see that there's more going on in this story than just this one thought. So that might look like we can help him notice that this might be the first time he's learning how to ride a bike. And it's going to take time and it's going to take practice. We might help him notice that he's done this before where it took some time to get to, for instance, playing baseball. It took some time for him to learn how to make contact with that bat, how to hit the bat. So we can point that out for him. We can even shift his focus to a birthday party he's got coming up that same day that he's excited about. A part of this wheel, if you can see it, the bottom of it says, I am hungry. So oftentimes it's helpful for us to ask and think about the next slide. Is your child hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? So using this acronym is very helpful for ourselves to help make sense of our experiences, because oftentimes these can be on the forefront. It's also helpful to teach our children this acronym so they can use this as well to help make sense of their experience too. So just a simple acronym, HALT. Is my child hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? So, helping our children make sense of the whole story allows them to feel like they have some sense of control and understanding about what they think, how they feel, and why they behave the way that they do. So, after we help them see the whole story, they can then see they don't have to be controlled by their thoughts, their emotions, or their actions. They get to decide how they think and how they feel about their experiences. Your child might learn that first thought is unhelpful. In fact, it's a thinking error. I am stupid for not knowing how to ride a bike. It's a thinking error. But thinking about it with the whole story in mind might allow the child to think through it differently, changing the way they even view themselves. So understanding your thoughts don't have to control you is really empowering for our children. So we like, if you'll go to the next slide, the saying here, and it's an Irish saying. So it talks about in Irish, when you talk about your emotion, you don't say, I am sad. You say, sadness is on me. And I love that because there's an implication of not identifying yourself with the emotion fully. I'm not sad. It's just that sadness is on me for a while, and something else will be on me another time. And that's a good thing to recognize. So, for our kids, oftentimes if they struggle with getting stuck on a feeling and a certain emotion, like I am sad, it can be really beneficial for us to help our kids by expressing sadness is actually on you, helping them notice it's not a part of who they are, but what they are feeling, and that feeling will end. So our kids are going to need help understanding that even big emotions like fear, frustration, sadness, loneliness are not, they're not enduring traits, but instead they are temporary states. So notice that when our kids get stuck, it's a moment for us to help them keep their upstairs brain back online, noticing that their emotion will end. So we're going to use this next strategy, letting the clouds of emotions roll by ourself first. So I want you to go back to that worksheet that you did with Abby about the negative things, or I guess it's a worksheet or a journal, whichever one you chose, about the negative things that you think about when you think about your kids, things that frustrate you. And notice how that feels. What emotions come up for you when you look at that negative list? And I just want you to pick one. And then we're going to do a mindfulness activity. And so I just want you to close your eyes. And I want you to pick one of those emotions and view it as a cloud. So focus on that cloud and notice its details. What size is it? Is it gray and stormy looking? Or is it white and fluffy? Is it clearly defined or wispy and shapeless? What feelings do you get when you see it? Does it feel ominous and threatening? Or perhaps low, lying, and sad? Don't make judgments about your cloud or how you should feel about it. Just notice what you notice. While you sit with those sensations, acknowledge that this cloud is important and real and something to pay attention to, just as all your emotions are. Like any cloud you see in the sky, your cloud may seem to sit still and linger at times. But if you continue to watch it, you'll notice that it's actually floating along, and you'll eventually drift out of sight. You may notice that you have thoughts in your head as you go through this visualization. Like, this is weird. My cloud is huge. It's never going to move. How long do I have to do this? Just let these thoughts, just like your cloud, come into awareness without judgment. Then let them move along out of your consciousness. You'll notice that as they pass, new thoughts come up. Like, I'm not supposed to judge my cloud, or I feel tired, or wow, my cloud is getting smaller. Again, just let those thoughts come up and move on. And stay with this just for a moment until you see your cloud disappear or drift out of sight. Okay, when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Did anybody notice anything different with that negative emotion, with that exercise, as you watched the cloud float by? That's okay. It's a different exercise. And so it's a part of the Smiling Mind app. And so we've talked about that the last couple of weeks, but it's another way to just slow down. And we can help our children use that same exact exercise with that app as well. So this just helps us notice the emotion and watch it float by on a cloud by noticing that it's just temporary.
Okay, we're going to take a little turn here and we're going to talk about how we integrate all of this into a healthy connection with other people. So we've talked a lot really throughout this course about how to change kind of our inner processing, our kids' inner processing. Changing their behaviors, but really looking more into the brain as a personal experience. And what we miss with that is the reality that healthy connections with others really contribute to our brains, our kids' brains, and not only our connection with our kids, right? We talked about connect and redirect and how our relationship with them impacts them, but also their relationships with other people besides us. So if you think about that concept of neuroplasticity, we know that relationships can help promote healthy neuroplasticity. We talked last week about the developmental stages and kind of what your kid needs in each of those stages in order to move on and move to the next stage. That's neuroplasticity. You want to make sure that those pathways in their brain at that age and stage are able to develop relationally with other people as they need to, because it's building blocks for their future. So when we form those healthy bonds, connections, and attachments, this essentially reminds our brains we're safe. We have people to rely on. We can be okay. We can go to someone if we really are having an issue. That can sometimes be you, but it's healthy for your kids to develop that with other people as well. And then we can really model these healthy relationships for our kids. So we can show our children what healthy relationship and connection looks like. We're able to form that foundation of healthy relationships for them. If we look at the Bible, Jesus talks about being in community with other people. God designed us to be in that community and to be with others. So we talk about how that family unit is kind of that primary source of that. But he designed us for more than even our family unit. He designed us to be with a body of believers in order to grow in him together the best that we can. So whether that means meeting in the church, going to discipleship groups, having other believers over into your home, these are all ways that you can model that for your kids. They're learning. Their brains are soaking that in and deciding, wow, this is a really important part of life, and I want to be able to do this too. We talk about how our brains were designed by God for connection. So I kind of mentioned that above, but connect and redirect is a prime example of that. We work best when we feel connected to ourselves, but then when we also feel connected to others. That's when our brain functions the best that it possibly can. We want to make sure that we help our kids see beyond themselves in order to care for and connect with others. So if you think about Jesus in the Bible, a lot of times throughout Scripture, he sought God, his Father. So he wanted to be in community with God. That was his main connection. He needed a lot of that. He even needed to go off alone and have that. So we definitely do. But he sought his Father, his primary connection. But then, he's also going out and sharing the good news and teaching his disciples how to do that. And he's in community with a body of believers as well. And so in this way, we can model, how to care for and connect to others. That care and connection with others can only go so much as we're connecting with God, and He's giving that ability for us. But going out there and making relationships and maintaining relationships is a huge part of not only being a healthy Christian, but also being a healthy human. We need that for our mental health and stability. So if you want to think about, every kid is going to be different, every person is going to be different. Does your kid need that extra push to get out there and to spend time with others and to be connected with other people? Do they tend to kind of shy away? Do they tend to be within themselves? And they need a little bit of that modeling to understand how important it is to be around their friends. Or does your kid overconnect? Do they over-identify? Are they unable to be alone? And it's hard for them to not fully rely on someone else, to not be kind of clingy to their friends or around them all the time. Maybe your kid needs reminded of where they are grounded. Like what do they find their identity in? And kind of a little bit of help in reining that back. So that's helpful to think about when you understand fostering these healthy connections for your kids. Each kid is going to be different. It doesn't always mean pushing them to have more friends. It might mean helping them discern who's the right friends and how attached do you get to a friend too quickly. All right. So we've also talked a lot about, throughout our time together, of making sense of your own story. So thinking about, what did your parents do? How do you react? What's in your past? What are your main emotions that you deal with? And these are all things that contribute to you understanding yourself and understanding your story. We want to think about our feelings about our past. So having our life narrative and really understanding who we are and where we come from means our feelings about what happened to us. It means our understanding of why people like our parents behaved the way that they did. So instead of jumping to conclusions or having some negative thinking errors around that, we really want to get to the root of kind of what was the why behind that, or what do I know about the why behind that? What can I understand better? We can increase our awareness of the way those events have impacted our development into adulthood. What did you not get during those kind of critical developmental stages that we talked about for your kid? Early experience isn't fate, so making sense of your past can actually free yourself from what otherwise might be this kind of legacy of pain and insecure attachment or poor connection. This can go on for generations, and maybe you're the product of that. Maybe that's a difficult thing that you've dealt with, is the way that your parents created this narrative for you, or the way that other people in your life, in your childhood, created this narrative for you. But like I mentioned earlier when I was talking to someone today, it doesn't have to define us. It's part of our story. The reality is it's there, but it doesn't have to wire our brain based on that. We do have the ability to heal and come out of that. And we can have control over our own story from here on out and the way our brain thinks about our story. So I wanted to kind of think about an example. Maybe someone who experienced abuse during their childhood could develop an inner unconscious narrative of I'm messed up. Maybe some things fed into that. Maybe that's a pathway that's there from neuroplasticity. But by examining their past, looking at their life narrative, looking at your thoughts, and challenging the helpfulness of those thoughts based on your past, they may be able to eventually develop an inner narrative of, I'm strong and wise because of the things I survived. It still acknowledges the hurt, the pain, the hardship, but it's a shift, and it's empowering, and it means that your brain can do that and hold on to that. So I think just knowing that the hard work that you guys are doing, knowing that the ones who have stuck this out and stayed here with us, and the things that you're doing at home from what we've talked about really are impacting your kids, and they're carrying that with them to your grandkids and your great grandkids. And so those little hard moments throughout the day seem like it's just a blip in time. But with that consistency, it's like generations that you can change by working on yourself in these ways. And I just think that is so cool, to be able to have that opportunity to do that. You're not just impacting one person, but it could be multiple people.
So we want to end on a question. In your mind's eye, I want you to envision your child walking across the stage, a high school graduation. And I want you to envision your child leaving your home. I want you to envision your children as adults and think about what they'll be like. What personality traits will they have? Think about what you'll have modeled for them. Now I want you to imagine your child grown up, holding your grandchild. What kind of parent will they be? Kind, respectful, present, patient? The reason we want you to think about this is not to put pressure on you, but instead to point you at how exciting it is that you want to be a connected parent and you're making that effort. So by doing this difficult work of examining your own parenting style and thinking about how to be a better parent, to your children, you're offering, like Abby said, your future grandchildren an important gift that can last for generations to come. So you're teaching them to connect and acknowledge their emotions. You're teaching them to learn about and use the whole brain and to focus their attention on the whole story so they can take control of their own emotions, thoughts, and actions. So we want to encourage you to parent in a way you can be proud of and to raise your children into adults you can be proud of as well.
Yeah, I just want to pray over you guys. I know I opened us in prayer, but just to pray for your kids and to pray for your experience as you leave here, and what you can do with this and how you can impact other people. So, dear Jesus, I just thank you so much for this opportunity to just be able to speak on these things that you've put on Ashley and I's heart, and just the privilege it is to be able to meet with all of these families week after week and just talk about what we feel so passionate about and just what we see you can do in these families and just how you can work. And I just pray over all these points that Ashley pointed out that we've walked through throughout these weeks, that these kids can feel a difference in their parents. Maybe these kids feel a shift, like they feel that extra connection, they feel that extra warmth, they feel that intentionality in their parent understanding them, and knowing them better. And I just pray over that connection between all these parents in this room and their child. I pray that their child is able to feel their parents' love in a similar way that we feel love from you. We know your love is perfect, it's endless, it's not based on what we do, what we say, even what we think, but it's based on just your perfect love for us and just your sacrifice. And so I pray that as these kids are growing up, that they see that love in their parent and that it ultimately points them to you. They see their dad gently getting down on his knee, wanting to know how their day was and how they felt about their day. And they're able to see that gentleness that Jesus had on this earth and that he modeled for us in caring about one little thing, caring about the hair on our heads, and just really wanting to understand us to our fullness. And so I just pray that in these families, that is the biggest thing. Whether they mess up, whether they use these tools, or they're just able to remember one thing, I just pray that the one thing is that their family and their unit and their connection looks more and more like you every day. We love you so much, Lord, and we thank you for this time. In your name, amen.
There's also in your worksheets, the last worksheet has to do with your experiences. And so if you'll just take that home and just think through some of that, I think that's helpful as we tell our narrative and make sense of our story. So that's just a helpful tool to take home. For those of you who are here for foster care, Black Mountain Home for the Children, to get CEUs, we do have those certificates for you guys. And if you hadn't been here before and hadn't signed up, I can give you a certificate for that too. So we have all that available for you. So if you have any questions, for us, you can put it in the care cards in the back, and we'll be happy to email you. Or help in any way that we can. So we just appreciate the opportunity to be here. And thank you guys so much again for coming and just the effort that you're putting towards the kiddos. So thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks for being here. We just really appreciate it. And we've loved all the participation that you got. I mean, it's clear that you're listening and just trying to grow. So that's been really cool and encouraging for us to see. So thank you guys.